Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for your service. I will tell you, this past Friday, as I was in the El Paso sector, I just was really grateful for the men and women that are there and are working. I know you all have brought people in from across the country. I saw a guy from Memphis who was down working, had been down for a few weeks, helping out the Coast Guard, as you mentioned, helping with health and doing some of those screenings. And this is just such a heart-wrenching situation, especially when you look at the children and the unaccompanied alien children. And we know this is an issue. When I was in the House and in 2014 had visited one of the centers, raised concerns and couldn't get bipartisan agreement to do some things at that point. And you know, being down there and visiting with some of these unaccompanied alien children, there was even a 1-year-old in that facility. She was there with her mom, who was a minor child, and they were waiting to find out what was going to happen with them. But one of the things that the Office of Refugee Resettlement, one of their actions concerns me, and this is the unreviewable discretion and utilizing that to allow the release of these UACs. Traffickers of these children are really taking advantage of the loopholes that exist, whether it's the rent-a-child policy or sending a child forward, and that child ends up with sex trafficking or labor trafficking or maybe into a gang. And many times these adult sponsors that are seeking the custody are themselves in the country illegally, and they are not related to this child, and they do not have that child's welfare at heart. And Senator Grassley mentioned the accountability for care of the UACs, the bill that we have filed, and it codifies that existing agreement between DHS and HHS to share that criminal background history. And I would like to hear from you what else you think we need to be doing to support your agents. We know you need more funding. We know that agents need more manpower, and that we've got a lot of agents down there now that are tending to feeding duties. They are dealing in these centers. 2 of the centers I visited, one was built to accommodate 85, the other built to accommodate 123, and now they each have over 1,200. So tell us what we can do to help lessen this burden that we've not discussed yet today.
Okay. Thank you, Senator, and thank you, first of all, for just talking about our men and women. And I appreciate the chairman at the opening also acknowledging that we have tremendous law enforcement professionals that are doing extraordinary work to protect vulnerable populations, and work that they're not trained for, they didn't sign up for. They signed up to secure the border, but now they're caring for families and kids, and they're doing it with honor. I do worry very much that it's not sustainable. I worry about their health. I worry about their families, and I appreciate you acknowledging the heart with which they're doing their job. And we do have 325 DHS volunteers down there now supporting. We've got 700 CBP officers from around the country supporting Border Patrol agents, and then, of course, the Coast Guard. What we do need from the supplemental is the funding to provide a better situation so that children are not waiting in those Border Patrol stations that you saw, that they're moving to HHS facilities, including that young mother, very quickly. That's the requirement in law. That's a commitment we should be able to meet. We need the funding to do that. We also need the support for the transportation, the temporary facilities we need to get that crowding down in our stations so that they have room to have a better situation while they're waiting for transfer, and the ability to hold single adults in ICE custody as we've exceeded our beds. We need all of that funding. You mentioned HHS and the efforts they undertake to ensure that children are placed with sponsors effectively. I know they work very hard at that. The fact, though, that you just raised is that most children are being released to parents, but parents who are here unlawfully. And that's a continued challenge in this cycle. One of the things that we do need is the ability to share information so that we can make sure that all federal law enforcement information that might pertain to the safety of that child when they're released is available to HHS making that determination, and that's a challenge we're facing right now. But the critical needs are that $3.3 billion, 75% of the supplemental going to HHS to provide adequate facilities for unaccompanied children, and then the 25% so that DHS can manage this crisis effectively
Let's
and
talk a
support our
little
men
bit
and women.
about the wall also. When I was riding with the Border Patrol, within 30 minutes, we saw 12 people just come walking right up, raise their hands, want amnesty, and they're coming across where there is no wall, and they're walking right across that dry riverbed. Now, if a U.S. citizen was in Mexico and walked across that riverbed, they would be arrested for unlawful entry and disobeying our immigration laws. But with it being someone who is not a U.S. citizen, we are taking them in, and the process begins. In that Santa Teresa station, there were about 1,000 migrants that were there: Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Cuba. A large group of Cubans that were there. But one of the things that is so vital is to have that wall. And I heard it from every single agent. And just for the record, speak a little bit about that physical deterrence, its need, and how many miles you have under construction right now.
Right. So the request for additional barrier on the border comes from our agents on the ground who need it to control key areas of the border where we have high traffic or where there's an ability to disappear on the U.S. side into infrastructure or into transportation very quickly. It's a stated known requirement. We've had it for decades, and we've applied wall or barrier effectively in multiple sectors on the border, and we need more of it. Right now, we're building the wall funding appropriated in 18 and 19. We finished the 17 build already. That's about 40 miles. The 18 funding covers about 85, and we're already applying the funding for 19 as well, going as fast as we can to get that additional barrier up. And again, it comes with cameras, with sensors, with lighting, with roads, with all kinds of important function for our agents to effectively secure those areas of border. And we absolutely do need it to address those that are trying to evade capture. We do have the problem of people presenting to agents, but we've got about 30% are trying to evade capture. They include drug smugglers, criminals, and gang members that we need to stop effectively.
My time's expired. I appreciate the work that you and the Border Patrol are continuing to do. Yield back.